Welcome back, everybody, to Hearthstone Masters Tour Asia Pacific, and things are starting to heat up now as we enter round number 8, and it is my great pleasure to welcome Gia to the illustrious world of European Grandmasters casting, as the matchup that we have for you is a matchup between two European Grandmasters, two people who did have to fight their way out of the relegation bracket, but who did end up surviving, and that is Zim and Tice.
Yeah, very storied players despite Zim only having one season of GM under his belt. So fought a very, very difficult series versus Hunters to escape relegation at the very end there. And let's not belittle the fact that Zim made it this far into GM in the first place because he's excelled in the Masters Tour system. And here he is again in yet another great score, a good position to possibly take a top 8 entrance. But Tice, I'm also very happy to see because we hear it over and over again that Tice is streamer now or whatever. It's just not true. He puts in the work, he puts in the results, and here he is again.
Yeah, from me. Like I generally took that line starting a couple of years ago, maybe 18 months ago, just, to try and get a reaction out of people, rile people up. Like, yeah, Tice is washed up. He's just a streamer now. Eventually, even I couldn't continue to annoy people with a straight face as he just continued to prove me wrong time after time. Every tournament he enters, he gives his 100% utmost to, and his just natural ability as a Hearthstone player shines through. And let's not forget, when we say someone is a streamer, what we mean is that they sit and play Hearthstone for 8 to 10 hours a day, every single day. Like, you're not going to end up being that bad at the game if that's what you choose to do 7 days a week.
And it's also worth noting that both these players are in the China Gold League that's going on right now, a team event where there's a mix of both constructed and battlegrounds gameplay. And this is also a very high level event, including players that, they even had to recruit outside of their own teams because there just wasn't enough people to fill those slots. I think it's very exciting that we have that type of circuit going on outside of what we view on the mainstream as well. But the fact that they're balancing that with this, which means they're playing in every single time zone imaginable, just blows my mind. And we are going to see the series culminate also in what looks to be, I think, pretty standard classes. And the warrior bands is very reminiscent of what we usually see in GM.
Yeah, I think the one wrinkle here is that we do see the Demon Hunter still coming out from Zim, whereas Tice has moved away from it. There's a big talking point coming into this is obviously another wave of nerfs did hit Demon Hunter. And as with most of them, a lot of people were reacting to this Demon Hunter nerf thinking, okay, this might be the one that puts the final nail in the coffin. Were you one of those people, Gia? Like, would Demon Hunter have been in your lineup for this tournament if you were playing?
I have to admit it would not have been, but that's also because I didn't see the power of Cobalt's Falcon and just alternate ways to build the late game package. I don't think that it's going to be playing the same 30 cards as before the nerfs. That Demon Hunter is quite good enough, but I really respect to put in the time with what little time they had to get in a bunch of different testing, and it really, really helps to have a solid practice group in that regard. So for Zim in particular, he has a very strong regiment of French players that are helping him out, and also Gallon in that equation. Right, the whole region seems to have just the sheer manpower, I think, to put in collectively more hours than most other practice groups and find out what are the good deck lists. And so, if you're coming into the tournament and still bringing Demon Hunter with most of the cards the same, I have to say that they probably still just tested this a lot and said that it's good enough.
So what I got from all of that, Gio, was that since Alatemu has put one new card in Demon Hunter, that means it's the nuts again because Alatemu did it, right? That's pretty much what you said?
Uh-huh. Even though I mentioned his name once, because you started off this entire cast by saying, "Welcome to the illustrious world of EU Grandmasters casting." I was gonna say, it's our dude who's 7-0 right now.
It is indeed. He is one of the 3 remaining 7-0s, I believe. Alatomu, one of the absolute leading lights for the Asia Pacific region. Both of these players, I believe, sitting at 6-1. Still very much in contention as just this round and one more round to go. But just digging into the lineups a little bit more, as I believe we are just waiting for Tice to return and resume the position to start series of Hearthstone. We apologize for the short delay. What else do you see standing out here? We've talked about the Demon Hunter, but I guess also the Warlock and the Druid are the big differences on either side from Zim and Tice? Are you seeing an edge go one way or the other here?
As far as where the edge leans, I have to give it to Tice a little bit because I feel like Druid is still in a pretty good spot in the meta. I don't think that the nerf to Fungal Fortunes hurt it very much, and I could see this Quest Warlock from Zim struggling in particular against that Druid and the Highlander Hunter, although it could find a home in the Rogue matchup in particular. The Tempo Demon Hunter from Zim is very akin to what I've been seeing on ladder prior to the nerfs. The entire Enrage package still in there with the two Bone Chewer Brawlers and the one of Amani Berserker. So there's not much change, but he could just be making the read that if you're looking at other Demon Hunters being in the meta, I'm not necessarily sure that replacing Warglaves is the way to go, even if it has gotten nerfed. So maybe this lineup has been built with something other than what Tice has brought in mind.
Yeah, I have actually seen a couple of players tweeting. I believe Gallon was one of them, talking about that French practice group, saying that they regretted still having Warglaves in their Demon Hunter, and that actually it's down to them kind of over-predicting how much Priest there was going to be, and that Warglaves is really only useful in that matchup, and outside of that, they would have liked to cut it. But of course, it's the byproduct of this tournament, which we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but there was a nerf with only about 2 days of practice because of the accelerated time zone of being in Asia-Pacific here as well, for these players to put anything together. So I think there's a lot of people who will be going into this with just some questions about their lineup. I don't think too many people will be 100% confident that they nailed down 120 cards in their lineup.
Yeah, I would be surprised if there's even one person that said every single card feels right with the amount of time that they had. But we are finally going to get into the game, and it is going to be that deck we were talking about so much, starting off for Zim up against Tice's Rogue. And with all the nerfs to Demon Hunter, it already felt like Rogue prior to this set of card changes felt to be in a pretty good spot against Demon Hunter, in my opinion.
Right.
Due mainly to Spy Mistress, which notably is only a one of in Tice's list. Despite that, though, I think with all the card changes to Demon Hunter, it can only get more favorable.
Yeah, you would expect so. I think, incrementally, the Rogues were leaning more and more towards anti-Demon Hunter builds because that felt like a core matchup, particularly in competitive, in Grandmasters, in Masters Tour qualifiers and Masters Tours themselves. If you were bringing Rogue, you generally expected that, one of your slightly unfavored matchups was going to be Demon Hunter, so people started to tweak their decks in ways to address that. I do think the Questing Adventurers that came in started to help out a little bit, but you're absolutely right in pointing out that I think the big addition was that Spy Mistress. And now perhaps with a little less Demon Hunter expected, Tice has gone down to that single copy, as you said.
Indeed. And although it's hardly ever justifiable, I would say, to coin out a secret into secret curve, the fact that it's particularly ambush and that Zim's list is a bit heavier on 2-drops than other Demon Hunter lists with the double Brawlers and Berserker, I think it's perfectly reasonable for Tice to make that read that the follow-up is, if not a minion, it's just going to be Umberwing, in which case then he can follow up with Dagger, and then he gets heavily rewarded for it here. It's just a question of whether he wants to equip the Dagger for future flexibility or go for the Sturdy Tricks, which is not very likely, I would say, to get value anytime soon.
I think personally I'm leaning towards the Dagger because of that prep draw. I think that's made things really interesting for Tice over the coming turns, because now if he holds on to the Secret, he does have the potential for prep Secret Evil Miscreant on the following turn, or even going Questing Adventurer if he wants to just tempo out instead. But Tice disagrees, does just throw out the Secret on curve.
Yeah, that is a little bit surprising me because of what you pointed out for the combo potential. Now we could be looking at preparation simply as an activator for Miscreant, which doesn't feel all that good. But maybe Tice was thinking without an immediately good Dagger target in hand, he doesn't want to present, say, a clean Frozen Shadow Weaver turn for Zim.
Sure.
That's a big draw, though.
It is. It's just something to do this turn. Obviously, it's not the most blowout blackjack stunner you're ever going to see, but it's tempo for Tice, and this is something that we actually saw him do on a lot of occasions during Grandmasters while playing Secret Rogue. I think there was one particular warrior matchup where the warrior was just, playing their egg, playing their armor smith, whatever early minions they were dropping down, and Tice was just blackjack stunnering and shadow stepping every single one of them for like 3 or 4 turns in a row. It's a really, really wacky early game curve that Tice played out, but shows his understanding that, the card doesn't have to be a big blowout in a lot of spots. It can just be a nice little cute tempo tool.
Right, and if you just kind of fight scrappily in the early game for that little bit of board advantage. From there, Rogue just does Rogue things and never lets go of the board, and that Seal Fade draw is absolutely huge here. Allows Tice to fill out the curve very nicely and fit in a big tempo swing with his questing adventure. This is what he was hopefully building up towards. Yes, it was a top deck, but it wouldn't nearly have been this easy had he not gone for the Blackjack Center on the previous turn.
Yeah, and Zim now with no answer to this questing means that he just has to hope Tice has the clunkiest hand imaginable. But Zim knows one of those cards is a lackey currently, but he's going to get the incredibly bad news that there's an evil miscreant coming down to follow this up as well. Oh, wow. And the Kobold lackey.
Shoot, man.
Yes, sorry, you are absolutely correct. Look at me, la-di-da over here with my Kobold lackey.
Oh, Zim wants to remove that questing. He has to face tank it, and he pretty much just feeds his Glavebound Adept to a lackey and the Bloodfen, but I'm not seeing Warglaves as an option here either.
And even if that were to happen, that's not clearing the lackeys off the board, which means Tice curves out straight into Heist Baron Togwaggle on the following turn as well.
It's been a snowball ever since that prep into Seal Fate combination. And for Tice, we did see him have the potential to go for that questing blowout earlier on with the Secret, and we were talking about daggering up, but I guess that wasn't taking into account the fact that there are more impactful spells for the big swing to snowball all at once. So if you pair a removal spell with the questing turn as opposed to just a pre-developed Secret, the payoff can be that much bigger.
Yeah, for sure. It certainly looks like Tice's line has worked out really nicely for him in this game. Him just doing his best here to scrap from behind. There is nothing doing. He can't even answer the Togwaggle on board, let alone this flood of zero-cost cards. Somehow, Wondrous Wand escaped the great zero-cost purge of 2020.
And in these types of spots, previously Demon Hunter could still hope that should this Wondrous Wand whiff, and that's a big if, then maybe they can buy some time with a Skull of Gold on top deck into Frozen Shadow Weavers and then put together a lethal with Metamorphosis. But those cards have been nerfed as well. And sure, take the Priestess of Fury. Just end it quicker. Why not?
Now I'm just counting lethal. Like, he's Rush Lackey, Shadow Step the Kobold Lackey, Blackjack Stunner the Kobold Lackey.
Not quite this turn, Soddle, but it is lethal in effect.
That looks like lethal to me. Zim's going to give it up, and that is going to be a very, very straightforward victory for Tice there in the Rogue versus Demon Hunter matchup. And after we spent so long singing the praises of Demon Hunter early on, it was just Rogue, which I think continues to be one of, if not the best performing classes in this tournament, which is something that I found a little surprising. I did think Rogue was being effective when I was building my theoretical lineup for the tournament. It did have Rogue in it after what limited testing I was able to put in as well, but wouldn't necessarily put it as a forerunner of the highest win rate deck in the tournament.
Especially since we've seen Rogue on such a roller coaster of opinions throughout the entire Grandmaster season. At first, people were saying it's the absolute nuts. Why would you not play a deck that has a lot of zero-cost cards? And then it took a dip in popularity as people were going for more aggressive strategies. But then that wave of nerfs that hit Zoo saw Rogue into a resurgence again. And now that Rogue has also been hit by the balance patch, you would think that it would just put it on par with where it was previously. But I think because Demon Hunter was disproportionately affected by the card changes compared to all the other classes, and that was the one that Rogue could sometimes struggle against. We're seeing now the power that it has in general across the field, and I think in terms of the implications of that deck getting a win in this particular matchup of Tice versus Zim, it's going to be difficult now for Zim's Questlok to find a win anywhere.
That is a very good point. Yeah, I think the matches that remain for the quest log are winnable. Perhaps the slightly unfavorables with the druid, and perhaps slightly more unfavorable with the hunter, just because of the consistent aggression that does come through. But they are winnable. We saw Gabby winning the matchup with a timely Caladan draw off the top as the quest warlock against druid just in our previous series before we came into round number 8. So certainly can be done. But I completely agree with you. That would have been a matchup that Zim would have really liked to line up the rogue into his quest lock, which, let's not forget, is kind of a pet deck for him. Zim started off the GM season on the OTK Demon Hunter, kind of showing a little penchant for the combo decks, the Kael'thas version with Inner Demons, all that kind of business. As soon as that kind of got nerfed out of the game, he then started picking up the Quest Warlock instead, and he's kind of been having at least one combo style deck in his lineup almost every week throughout GM, so he does seem to enjoy that playstyle.
Yeah, and sorry, I got caught up on the fact that you pronounced it penchant when you were talking about a French player. I am not sure if that was on purpose, but I appreciated it. However, it's going to be later on, if at all, that we see that quest lock, because we get another go in the Demon Hunter, which makes a lot of sense because I think it's got a great shot no matter what of Tice's remaining decks he does queue up, and he does decide to start off with the Highlander Hunter, but that is quite an oppressive opening hand from Tice.
Yeah, I'll say I was paying tribute to the French player, but the reality is I'm just incredibly pretentious, Gia.
Enchanted Raven.
Excellent. Skipping on turn 1 though for Zim, we've seen this debate come up multiple times throughout recent competitive Hearthstone as well, the beaming sidekick on 1 or not. Particularly I think in the Demon Hunter mirror it's been the object of most debate, but I think with the Bone Chewer Brawler follow-up here, I think Zim probably making the right call to hold on to the beaming sidekick.
Yeah, I think it has pretty good ability to pair with either of these minions and get them out of the crucial 3 health range, which is what Hunter likes to deal with that card right there that Tice drew, the Corrosive Breath and also Stormhammer later on. That is pretty perfect for this turn. Tice can then follow up with either a 1-drop and the other 1-drop. Even if it's off curve, I feel like going wide is very useful against Demon Hunter or the Scale Rider.
Zim absolutely not feeling it, although that is a good top deck for him. Battle Fiends to curve out alongside the Umberwing. Although actually looking at it, do you like the Umberwing here more than the additional Beaming Sidekicks on the board?
I definitely do, because the Beaming Sidekick health that is added doesn't really line up well against the Imprisoned Felmaw.
Right.
I think by Zim putting more garbage onto the board that you would rather soak up the Felmaw damage makes it slightly more favorable for him, but he gets the bad news that it's a good boy, and there's also a Scale Rider to follow up.
And the hits are going to keep on coming here for Tice. He has pretty good-looking tempo options with the Goblin Org Merchant currently as it stands, although the Beaming Sidekicks might have something to say about that. It might just be the 5-mana turn for Tice, though, that gets a little bit sticky for him.
Yes, indeed. I think that was not the most straightforward thing for Zim to do, is trade all of the 1/1s and his weapon charge into the 3/3, because the way his board state currently was at, it didn't look like the 3/3 had any good trades onto the immediate board, and it's kind of a struggle for Hunter to deal with these small minions when they don't have Desert Spear. But Zim is perhaps respecting the fact that after the Felmaw gets unfrozen, he might have to trade into it anyway.
Talking about Tice having an ugly turn 5, Zim's turn 5 kind of equally so here. The Beaming Sidekick is nice to be able to pick up his choice of value trades here, but nothing approaching any kind of mana utilization for him here.
And we saw that there was a possibility for Zim to face tank and clear the Felmaw instead, but he's already feeling pressure on his health total. I'm not entirely sure I agree with how those trades went, though, because the way the board state ends up, it just takes the Aug Merchant into the Frozen Shadow Weaver, and Zim is left with nothing. This could be, though, the play that says, I just want to survive into my Skull of Gul'dan and go from there.
Tice now choosing to hold on. He is going to greed that Acidic Swamp Ooze, doesn't think it adds enough to the board state, which is going to leave him slightly behind. And this is the second time now we've seen this today, Skull of Gul'dan being given up for the additional tempo on board, which I do definitely like in this situation. We saw it previously where the positions were flipped. The Skull was the top deck cards, and I was questioning it a lot more then because Skull gets stranded in that position as you then draw more cards from the right-hand side. But with the Skull in perfect outcast position on the left-hand side, Zim's looking pretty comfortable.
Right. And Tice holding onto the ooze, I want to say it's a little bit greedy, but maybe he was thinking that there could be a Warglaves coming down on the 6-mana turn. And now, unfortunately for him, he has to just play that Varanus to try and put some threat on board, even though it lines up very poorly into the Gravebound Adept. He just doesn't have time to play it because he has his turns locked up with Bran and Tiamat. Definitely think this is a Tiamat turn to start off, though.
Is it? Is there any merit to just smashing your opponent in the face with Dynatamer Brand?
So they go to 5, and if they put 3 minions on board, which is unlikely, you still have lethal on the follow-up.
We have Desert Spear as well alongside that, and you have 8 mana, so you can go Spear, Unleash Hero Power, so they actually only had to have 2 minions on board.
Let me take a quick look if I-Beam has still made the cut in this list. It has not, so that's a reason also for keeping the face plan going. And of course, Demon Hunter doesn't play taunts, if any. So the other reason that we default to for Tiamat versus Dinotamer Brand is whether Tice thinks Zim has the counter lethal. And 9 from hand is a lot to ask for, I would say, after all of these nerfs, but not impossible. Warglaves and some slices and Chaos Strike. I think that the Tiamat is safer overall, but I have to say it's coming down to a gut feeling more than any concrete reason I can put into words right now. Yeah.
I do. So I was playing Devil's Advocate, but I do like the Tiamat play, and my reasoning for that is obviously Tice is just trying to count to lethal right there and push damage, right? So it feels like maybe on the surface that getting Dinotamer Brand down and trying to attack multiple times with it was the most efficient way to get damage. But against Demon Hunter, they don't have ways to remove minions that isn't hitting them with their face.
Right.
So if he just gets a 6/6 in play that's over-contested, that's dealing 6 damage in almost every conceivable world. So at that point, he is just then setting up lethal on the following turn for the Dinotamer Brand. So I do definitely like the way that Tice played that game. Only question mark for me is whether Acidic Swampu should have been a Bloodfen Raptor a couple of turns earlier, but I don't necessarily think it was going to have a huge impact on the state of the game.
It did get very close at the end there, and you know, you could see the reasoning for Tice wanting to be greedy with the ooze because he was at 27 health, feeling very, very safe. But one glaive bound into a slow Varanus turn changed all of that and turned it on its head. And as you were talking about how a lot of the time the damage from Tiamat is going to connect face, I was going to say that Frozen Shadow Weaver could be stopping that, but that would be even more oppressive against the Dinotamer Brand had it gone onto the board first.
Yeah, the difference then, I guess, is you are still setting up the Unleash the Hounds Desert Spear lethal that we were talking about before. So I guess there is pluses and minuses either way. But I think Tice's line was entirely fine the way he played it. And now he is going to move on to his final deck, which is the slightly more dragon-influenced version of the Spell Druid. Do you have any particular opinions on this build of the deck?
I do think it's become the standard build. It's rarer and rarer to see the non-dragon package, and people are starting to see that if you're already going to be playing a deck that largely involves high rolling, why not high roll a little bit more and go all in on, you know, even more snowball effects with further ramp. And if you don't hit the dragons, there's still that regular possibility of going Fungal Fortunes into Glowfly Swarm.
Did I miss something, by the way, or did Tice mulligan a dragon when he had Breath of Dreams in his hand?
I did not pay attention, and that's my bad that we're not in the regular season and I'm not looking that much.
Okay. Well, my job is done, all right? I don't have to mull it over anymore. My watch has finished, okay? So it'll leave me alone.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, fair enough.
And if he did mull the dragon, that would be a huge question mark for me. I feel like that would smooth out his curve very much so, but it's not to say that his hand is bad. He still has the juice, the Fungal Fortunes into coin Glowfly, but Zim has also hit a very powerful curve. He's going very wide, and I guess the biggest downside of running the dragon package, as you were talking about pros and cons, is that you're cutting removal, and it's so difficult to deal with these types of boards without having minions to begin with.
Right. Tice here, as you mentioned, is just looking a little bit slow, although now not so much. Now this hand just got significantly faster, if Tice would like it to be.
So the Glowfly now for 5 flies, I think, is very well warranted. It's not like Zim has access to AoE anytime soon. And at the very least, they are going to trade off these minions. The big punish, I suppose, would be beaming sidekicks. But even so, if you're killing off even 2 of these minions, I think that's a win for Tice.
Yep, absolutely agree. Zim looks like he is in decklist mode. That looked like the face of a man that was glancing to a second screen to check out some options in his opponent's decklist.
Yeah. Maybe looking at how many Power of the Wild are available, and that's the main reason for trading with the minions that can get value traded if there is a Power of the Wild available. But he takes the free 3 damage where he can get it.
Tice still nowhere near out of the woods, despite that incredibly clutch Innovate draw giving him the Glowfly Swarm.
And he's in full survival mode now. This Fungal Fortune stuck in hand. This is, I guess, a situation where the card change is very palpable. You saw Tice, he could have had possibly 2 more spells in hand instead of the one he drew from Breath of Dreams, had this Fungal Fortune still cost 2. But he still managed to stave off the worst of Zim's threats so far, as this Guardian Og Merchant is defying gravity for 2 seconds. Thank goodness we did not see another bug.
Yeah, and that would mean then if he had been able to squeeze in the Fungal Fortunes on turn 2 or whatever, his 5 Glowfly board would have potentially been a 7 Glowfly board, and he would have been able to just potentially run away with the game from there. So yeah, definitely having a pretty significant impact on this game, the nerf to Fungal Fortunes.
And Zim is going to continue the initiative. If Tice wants to push any more, or remove any more, I was going to say he would have to face tank the 4, but with that draw of the Crystal Power, things could get a little bit more breathing room for Tice here. I like that he starts off with the Fungal, because there was a way to full clear with the Hero Power, but I don't think removing a 2-1 is worth the opportunity cost of not playing Fungal Fortunes there.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that Fungal Fortunes was in serious danger of getting caught in hand, and Tice has progressed so slowly that even now on his going into his natural turn 6 next turn, he still kind of could use some ramp if he draws it here. It's almost always the case that at this stage in the game, Druids aren't really interested in drawing more ramp because they've already played their Overgrowth and are running away with the game, but that is not the case here.
Yep, and Zim had a good follow-up, but he's just drawn the best follow-up for that follow-up. And Tice, we saw him hold on Crystal Power because he recognized his 6 mana turn was going to be a bit awkward, so he knew he wasn't going to die immediately from 11. So he held on to that Crystal Power for removal on the next wave of minions, or healing, depending on what he saw. Oh, he gets the dragon off the top! Huge.
That is insane, but is it good enough in this situation? Still doesn't have anything to use the Iron Bark on, really, to protect himself.
True.
But discounting the Bog Beam is at least something.
That's right. I mean,
what to do?
He could just clear the board and go down to 3 HP. Sadly, the Crystal Power for removal does more than Crystal Power for healing in this case, because it's a 6 attack minion that he's going to remove with it.
He can then start putting up a potential taunt wall, though.
Or going for the overflow.
Or go for the overflow, yeah, but I was going to say, with Metamorphosis generally being cut out of a lot of these Demon Hunters now, including Zims, you are a lot safer than you used to be behind taunts.
It's true.
Is it cold in the shadows?
It's just Kayn, that's the big threat, and I guess the Skull, which Tice is not happy to see, but Zim has had pretty bad beats with the Demon Hunter, I would say, and still favorable so far. So this could be the one that gets him on. But Tice's Emerald Explorer might have something to say about it. So if he goes for Overflow, he can hit 2nd Crystal Power and 2nd Bog Beam.
What to do?
That's not enough to deal with the 4-4.
No, the second bog beam was cast for 3 in the early game, right?
Oh,
I believe
right,
so.
right.
Yeah.
And so it does seem like it's Emerald Explorer or bust. I'm looking at Twin Tyrant simply because
I like
if he
it too.
takes second Emerald Explorer, he can't really pair anything of significance with it on the next turn. Just Savage Roar. Another skull for Zim. Fishing for that cane. Or the Glavebound, sure.
Glavebound will do the job too, and Zim does get a game on the board. Tice is not going to run away with this one. And Tice, after I believe throwing away a dragon from his opening hand, did seem like he was in some serious need of ramp in that early game to get him through into his more powerful turns later on. He did end up hitting it anyway off his second Breath of Dreams as he top-decked the Emerald Explorer regardless, but that is a matchup that I don't think, I think Demon Hunter is going to need 3 or 4 more waves of nerfs before Druid becomes favored against Demon Hunter in a lot of situations.
Oh man, poor Illidan. Stop it, Subtle. Let's not advocate for even more changes. And not until we get more data. And of course, Demon Hunter is just going to come out on top. Knock on wood. We are going to see now the rest of Zim's lineup come into play. I do feel like that Quest Warlock is still very questionable against Druid, so I fully expect Zim to try and get the win with his Hunter first. But that's not to say that Hunter is an easy matchup against Druid. I think that the Glowfly Swarm, whereas in many matchups it's kind of fallen out of favor as game plan A for Druid, against Hunter it's still completely valid.
But Zim does have the undisputed tournament MVP in his opening hand, that Rottnest Drake, although he does choose to throw it away, looking for some more early game aggression. I have certainly flirted with the idea of keeping it in this matchup because it does very often become very impactful in the later period of the game, by which I mean around Druid turn 6 when they start playing massive 9-drop taunts against you. But something that I have found is that if you do that, you can quite easily get overrun by Glowfly Swarm early on because you haven't been aggressive enough in the early game because of your more greedy keep.
That's right. I mean, I was talking about game plan A in this particular matchup, which it is definitely Glowfly Swarm, and if it gets to the point where Druid is already onto their game plan B and you gave them the time, I'm not sure if just a Rot Nest later on would be good enough. And the Rot Nest, of course, is strongest when it's on curve, and by the time that it's dealing with a 9-cost minion, if it's unlocking lethal for you that turn, oftentimes the Druid can just draw and then outpace you anyway. But speaking of drawing and outpacing, the ramp and draw is there for Tice yet again.
Gee, I don't know what you mean. When you kill a 9-drop dragon taunt with it, that is on curve for Hunter. That's how Druid works, isn't it? You're from APAC. They always have 9 mana by turn 5.
All right. I mean, we could see it here happen for Tice. Fungal Fortune's second Overgrowth. Clearly, people have been taking notes from APAC.
Yes.
And of course, the dragon at the top because you can't get it from Fungal Fortune. You see?
No way! No way! Are you kidding me?
I saw the
Tice
golden
is actually
board.
going to have 10 mana going into Zim's turn 5.
And that's without the second Overgrowth played. Hey! It's the we colors. How can this be?
I think it's fair to say that both of these decks have got something approximating the absolute nuts in this scenario, so I'm pretty interested to see where this one ends up. And if it is as simple as just Ysera Unleashed Ironbark for Tice on the following turn, I think that is going to be pretty straightforward where this game is going to end up. But Tice might be able to divert to something else depending on what his draw is.
I mean, he'd be largely disincentivized from playing Overflow because he's got a bunch of cards in hand already, but he could dump those. Many of those are looking very dumpable if he wants to play around exactly Rottnest Drake, but Zim is debating playing it for tempo. I mean, he has to know something's up, right? Not necessarily Ysera Ironbark, but the odds that Tice has hit even Emerald Explorer be non-negligible there.
He does still have the Varanus in hand, though, is the thing, right? So going into his next turn, if the huge taunt does come down, he can just still make the trade, sacrificing a 3/3, and he's invested 6 attack into the board in advance of that anyway. So I think, actually, all things considered, even against a giant taunt, this comes out ahead in terms of damage.
So the alternate line was if you put down Fairy Dragon and Hero Power. I think that's... yeah, you're right. It is a little bit ahead in terms of damage.
Power of the Wild summoning the token, but the Rotnest Drake was already used. And this Varanus does not care at all about that extra token being summoned, and this is a ton more damage being thrown through now to the face. Ties all the way down at 3.
And even if he does hit all the Bog Beams in the world, that Feywing is not targetable. He can go for this Iron Bark, though, to try and trade it off.
The Iron Bark's insane, though. Depending on the size of some of these Dream Portal Dragons that come out, he can potentially make another huge taunt, and he picked up Crystal Power for additional healing.
The Crystal Power, as long as he fits it into the end of this turn, it's huge, because Zim was hoping that surely on top of all of that powerful ramp into Ysera, you won't have the healing to deal with my other plan. After the Rotnest, his backup was the Varanus, and after the Varanus, his backup was the Corrosive and Kill Command. But Tice looks like he has all of his bases covered. Second Crystal Power. What's going on?
Imagine thinking Tice doesn't have the absolute nuts against Yugia.
And he even hit a natural taunt. I mean, he will still Iron Bark, but it wasn't even necessarily played here for survival.
Ooh, using the second Crystal Power offensively for extra clearing power as well, which might just give him another tiny window, although I might just be overselling his chances in this position. He does have a lot of damage being dealt up. Unleash the Hounds are still unlikely to be relevant, though, with all the taunts in the way, but maybe Zephyrus can solve this equation alongside the Corrosive Breath and the Kill Command?
It is starting to look like Zephyrus is the only out, right? From Zim's perspective, he's seen both Crystal Power and one Overflow. And so Tice's only remaining healing outside of the Hero Power is the second Overflow. And if Zim expends any of these removal spells into minions, I think he has to know that it's more likely that Tice has refill than the other Overflow. There's Glowfly Swarms, there's Dragons. So I think Zim has to play Zephyrus top deck, as you mentioned.
So yeah, Corrosive Breath being used as removal because, great, that's what it's for. It deals the damage regardless. Allows him to take care of some of these problematic minions on the board and slow down the race coming in the other direction. Yeah, Kill Command is certainly the big question here. And having used the Corrosive Breath, since Zim no longer has the ability to play Beast and Kill Command this turn, I imagine he is holding on to it.
Yeah, as long as he fits in Hero Power, then Tice goes down to 8, presumably 9 if he Hero Powers, and that's the most that Zim is willing to expect at this point, because second Overflow is just not going to let him win the game in any world. And then Zim would still have mana for Kill Command, Zephyrus off the top into Lava Burst, which is 8.
Yeah, I am a little surprised that Hero Power wasn't pressed there for Zim. I do feel like that was kind of essential to a lot of his outs in this game.
What to do?
You might be thinking that, of course, the odds of top decking Zephyrus are very low from here, so he's taking a longer-term survival game plan, gives himself maybe one extra turn to draw into that, and this line, I think, makes it slightly better for him if he draws other impactful cards that aren't Zephyrus, so Tiamat, Dino Tamer Brand.
Sure. Just pegging Tice on having a subpar turn here, I guess, in that world, which we can see with Cast Division he certainly is not going to have, which probably explains our increased urgency over what Zim can see. But the second Overflow is going to make a giant mess, and speaking of giant mess, Nozdormu plus Dream Portals is pretty much the definition of the phrase.
So Zephyrus now has to give Shadow Word Ruin, but that's not even the top deck, and that's going to be game.
Yeah, Unleash Kill Command, just going for some removal options here. But I think this is as close to a concede play as you're really going to get in the situation.
Yep. Even a single Savage Roar
My hand is
would
too
be
full.
very close to just lights out for Zim, but of course it's the double roar this far deep that Tice has gone into his deck, and that is gonna close out the series. Tice, I think, despite having cast so much APAC Druid, is in with the best of the Druid players. No contest.
I mean, that was spectacular. What, twice that series? It was Breath of Dreams into the Dragon off the top. That second game in particular, 10 mana available to Tice going into his opponent's turn 5. And then not only that, but actually unbelievably, I think Zim was still favored to win the game from that position, even though it was ramped to 10 and then have the Giant Taunt follow-up. Because the Rotnest Drake, the MVP of Masters Tour Asia Pacific, was there for Zim alongside the Varanus to be able to clear through. I think he was in a favored position. But then it was the second Iron Bark off the top, the turn after, for Tice that then allowed him to continue making huge taunts with the Dream Portals that came off. I think, yeah, that was about as close to the absolute Stone Cold Druid nuts as you are ever going to see outside of the APAC region.
And I would go so far as to say that on top of that, Tice also needed overflow into timely crystal powers, and he got not one but 2 to heal out of range and remove the Varanus all in one turn. A lot had to go right for Tice there, but it's not to say that he didn't play to his own outs. I think I personally could have gotten carried away in that double crystal power turn and used them both for healing, whereas he recognized that using one for removal was much more efficient, and that does bring Tice up to a 7-1 score. Very strong shot to make it to the top 8, although it's not looking so good for Zim anymore.
No, I think picking up a second loss at this stage does tend to make things difficult for you. The tiebreakers are so tight, or I should say the top 8 spots are so tight in the way that this Swiss is broken down. I believe a lot of the time either 1 or 0 7-2s in the end up going through. So very, very tough to make it from that position if you don't pick up your second loss in the absolute final round. But still, Tice looking very, very promising, as he always continues to do, Gia. Every time we see him, he seems like he's a top performer.
I am just excited to see Tice and Alutamu clash in the top 8 with the greatest Druid mirror you have ever seen in the history of Druid. Just overgrowths on both sides. Ysera's coming down, and then I just want to see if both Druids hit the absolute dream, who actually comes out on top.
Yeah,
and let's take Glowfly first out of that equation, because
I think that makes things a lot more balanced. I think what we're learning is that Tice is now an honorary Japanese player, as despite being a multiple-time European champion, he's been accepted into the nation of Japan. But we still have plenty of action to come here in round 8, and so we're going to take a very quick break. We're going to be relieved by a couple of other wonderful casters who'll be able to take you around the tavern, show you everything that has been happening in the other games as we get ready to go into our final round.
More round 8 action coming up in just a moment. And this, to me, Derek, looks like maybe the best top 8 we've had, no matter who we get out of like the top 20 right now.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely perfect. It's got that great mix that I love to see of some of the established players proving themselves to be the absolute best of the best. I mean, to be honest, X-Blaze has already stamped his name in Hearthstone history, but were he to take another win here, it would be one of the most incredible feats or runs of tournament play that we've ever seen. It would probably just end up being number one in terms of years of Hearthstone for anyone. But there's also a lot of newcomers that we're seeing, or less well-represented players trying to fight for their spot up at the top. And it's kind of a good balance of that there. I think that we have right here Muzzy. Absolutely everyone knows him. The best player in America for a couple of years, I think, was pretty undeniable. And still very arguably holding on to that title. Although I think a couple other players like Bloodyface in particular may be putting a claim to that title. And Insane on the other side, a player that I don't think many of us are all too well acquainted with, Neil.
Yeah, he's been around for some time. He'll be a name that you recognise. It's a fairly memorable name, so if you've heard it once, you know he exists. He played for Ukraine on HGG a few years back, along with just Kalento, Neria, and Old Boy, who is leading the Swiss on 8-0. And by the way, they have the same 120 cards. He's obviously play tested with him. They have identical lineups. But he's also done some bits and pieces, like he just won the last 2 Solari Cups, which, it's only the sort of France regional thing and a few invites, I think, but it's $1,500 a time. You want to win those cups. So he's pretty good at this game, and he's gone 7-2 in the last 2 Master Tour events as well. So missed out on tiebreakers twice in a row.
Wow.
So would like to see him get it done, as much as I'd like to see Muzzy in this top 8. So Insane's going to have to earn it if he wants it.
He is indeed. And to start things off, we got ourselves a good old rogue in here. I think taking a look at the starting hands, it already appears that Muzzy is going with much less rogue now in Stealth Rogue, as opposed to Secret Rogue. I think the main reason this list disappeared for the most part is because Demon Hunter fell off a cliff, in most people's estimation. And this deck, I feel like personally, is a little bit stronger against the aggro builds. But I wonder what he's trying to hit with the stealth version instead.
I mean, maybe he was trying to hit Demon Hunter. I know that sounds,
very fair.
Sounds silly. Like we didn't know coming into this exactly what Demon Hunter would do. And honestly, if you ask me right now, what is Demon Hunter doing in this tournament? It's doing well, but I don't know. Like, I can't tell you which build is the dominant build. It's all over the place. Generous Mummy in your hand always feels like a total disaster in this deck.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if the entire game, to be perfectly honest. The game plan is quite clear. It is dominating earlier. It's not necessarily going to be so easy because Insane has a pretty good curve. Backstab as well is a premium card to find on this turn. And if you end up doing that in the game to start with both players trading their lackeys fairly evenly, I'm liking Insane's hand. High Sparrow and Togwaggle on its own, I think will be able to secure the mid game to be in his advantage.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. With the proviso that the Sage is likely to become active at some point, and Muzzy's going to draw a lot of cards, and by the time we get to Togwaggle land, he could well draw his own one. But yeah, for now, how the hands look, I'd have Insane a pip or 2 in front. But it changes fast. That sort of mini whiff here, suddenly, now he's got an awkward turn.
Yeah. And it's worth saying as well that if we are talking more about the fight for tempo in the mid game, which I think is really going to dictate how the entire texture of this game plays out, Muzzy does have Boom Pistol Bully as well, which traditionally, although it hasn't been played in Rogue for quite a while, was insanely powerful in the Rogue mirror, because almost every single one of Rogue's cards is a battle cry, it feels like at this point. And so being able to just lock out all the lackeys, High Sparrow and Togwaggle, Kronks, all the good cards you want to be playing. If he finds that as well, that could be the card that just cements the victory for Muzzy a little bit later on.
Yeah, I don't think you can even overstate it. It just literally shuts down the deck. Now I've said that, they'll find the one card it doesn't shut down, but every time I've thought about it, it's always more cards, not fewer than I expect with the Bully.
Insane certainly punished there for his positioning. you don't really think about betrayal, to be perfectly honest. However, I should say I don't really think about betrayal, but I'm not a 6-1 player in Masters Tour Asia Pacific. You have to be considering these things.
Not only that, but isn't it automatic?
It should be.
Like, if you don't play around rolling fireball, it's not automatic. I can understand that. But playing around betrayal, isn't that just what Hearthstone players automatically do, like, brainlessly? You just put the safe one in the middle, because there used to be more than just one effect for it. So it's always a weird mistake for me.
I agree, it should be being done, but a lot of things going on in these players' heads. While I can't be too upset at the mistake, still a mistake. You know, you've got to be finding your advantages when you can, when you're up against the likes of Muzzy. In my estimation, one of the absolute best players that has ever touched the game.
Yeah, it's interesting to me as well that Saiyan is also on a really good score. It's like the small change made a big difference in what you could bring to this event, and the top players have really found their way through this one.
Kind of interesting. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say it's kind of interesting to me that Insane held off on Heist Baron Togwaggle. Sorry, held off on Goblin Lackey there, because obviously he wants a Lackey on board for Heist Baron Togwaggle, but you could kind of make the argument that even though he's getting rid of the last Lackey from his hand, with 3 on board, it's very, very likely that one of them survives till the following turn. Whereas with 2, it's a little bit easier to clear off, which means that Togwaggle has to wait a full extra turn, even though you have the insurance policy of Goblin Lackey in hand. So I think personally I would actually have just thrown out the Goblin Lackey there to make it that little bit harder for a full clear.
Yeah, I wonder if he's just valuing the actual effect of the Lackey hire with Hanar in hand.
Possibly.
A 2/4 Rush minion is pretty good in a Rogue Mirror. Maybe he just wanted to have that value and not worried about Togwaggle for another turn. Perhaps. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say that's his argument, but it's not working out well for him. Both the lackeys are cleared off. Togwaggle can't come down on this turn. Kronks is, I guess, a decent backup plan if he just wants to play out a 6-drop on curve. But I do feel like he could have given himself, on average, a slightly better situation there.
Yep, I agree. And then he could just be Togwaggling now and getting himself well in front. You said all the way back on turn 2.5 that this Togwaggle was huge, and maybe he just missed a chance to get it down there. Is it worth prepping out the dirty tricks, or do you want to save it for some sort of Edwin shenanigans? Because this hand almost needs some help in a couple of turns' time. I guess he's got Togwaggle, he's okay.
Yeah, he's alright to just keep chugging along for the moment. Whereas Muzzy on his side of the board hasn't got the power cards yet. He hasn't found Galakron, Kronks, Togwaggle. He's instead just relying on the sort of mid-game okay cards in order to get the job done. However, as I mentioned earlier, Boom Pistol Bully is found, which means if Insane takes a turn off the gas here, where he's just developing the Togwaggle, if Muzzy can swing the board in his favor and stick that Boom Pistol, maybe he'll be able to prey on that low-tempo turn enough to pull ahead in the game.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's why people just can't decide whether they prefer the secrets or the stealth. The stealth definitely has less power available to it. It does draw just... Without the Boom Pistol versions in particular, it just draws a load of rubbish, but it draws so much of it that it overwhelms you. Whereas the secrets just have that little bit of power level available to them, but that little tiny bit slower. There's not really that much in it, but there is notable differences. I wonder how tempted he is here just to do something weird, like flick away the Sage or something. Maybe reading that Muzzy's going to get 3 more cards in a minute.
Wow. In the end, foregoing the Togwaggle, I mean, I have to imagine the reason he's holding off on Togwaggle is the prep in his hand allows him to just go for Togwaggle and the wand next turn, all in one fell swoop. So that does, I suppose, make it...
Building up for maybe a huge turn, swing turn, because he doesn't need a swing turn at the moment because he's already swung. So
it's
different,
smart, actually.
I think so too. Different to how I would go about it, but I would probably go about it terribly, so that's fine.
Well, I was talking about trying to stick the Boom Pistol and make that an effective lock on the board for the next couple of turns. This does not feel like that right now, though, to be honest. You need to be ahead on the board and use it to lock down that advantage. You don't really want to use it when you're behind, unless you're absolutely desperate.
And you can feel he's behind. Every turn, Muzzy's really struggling to be anywhere near ahead at the end of turn. And that's like how you judge in a rogue. That's a huge bamboozle. Ooh. And this is one of the problems that this version of the deck sometimes has, is you draw loads of cards, but you get to the point where none of them do anything.
Well, they're going to start doing stuff.
He's been unlucky. Yeah.
Yeah. I think next turn is the turn for Muzzy, where he actually starts to find some of the advantage of his cards. Because like you say, he's drawn a whole bunch of cards, but they're not the good cards. However, they can start working in conjunction with each other next turn, when he can go double questing, a whole bunch of effects, end up with 2, I don't know, 8/8s on the board, and try and swing the game that way. It just might be that one turn too slow, however.
That generous mummy is really a pain for him as well. It's just he's working with a 9-card maximum hand size in a deck that draws a lot of cards.
That's true.
You just can't get rid of it. You can't even. Yeah, you just want to trash it at this point and say, "I don't want you, card." And normally, of course, you just play it, but no, you can't even do that. Or you will lose. Every time I've seen anyone try to be clever with a generous mummy, you just lose.
Yes. Wow, insane foregoing Togwaggle again, even with the ability on this turn to actually play out the wand on the same turn. Instead, just trying to load up on the value from Hanar while he can. I see the reasoning behind this play, because Hanar is going to die. This value, you either get it now or you don't get it at all with the secrets.
Yeah, I agree with that, but is it right? Because he has such a good tempo lead that he could have just gone nutty here.
I think you just want to start doing your own powerful stuff before Muzzy has the time to swing back the game. I mean, I guess because of his large board presence, getting the secrets down and the flick is still a fairly large tempo swing. It gets him a lot of damage to the face. But 3 0-cost cards was extremely tempting on that turn.
I think it was very tempting, although now I look at how it's worked out. He said to Muzzy, you've got to clear this board, and then, given that you probably aren't in a good shape after clearing this board, you then have to clear a Togwaggle generator board the very next go.
Give me a quest.
And it may all just be too much for the Muzz, unless he can hit Galakron into Kronks and all that nonsense off the top. Because his questing is maybe not going to be enough to get there quite yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a speed issue rather than a size issue. This thing's going to be gigantic.
Hey! I guess that's something working in Muzzy's favour at the very least. He's caught a break.
No, I think he's very dead.
I think he's fairly dead.
Well,
okay, if he can hit Bluegill Warriors, some kind of charge effect.
Oof. Oh, and just at the end, the Titanic Lackey that he can't use.
Yeah.
And he is dead to the Goblin Lackey that was saved for this purpose all along.
Insane saw the lines. I think fairly well decided there along the way from Insane. The hesitance to play Togwaggle at all points is pretty interesting, to be fair, but all the lines that he was taking were, weirdly enough, kind of doing what the Boom Pistol Bully wanted to do for Muzzy. They just made it harder to clear the board. Boom Pistol obviously stops your opponent from playing their cards entirely, but the secrets from Hanar were just really annoying at all points along the way. It made it so much more difficult for Muzzy to clear everything off, and then Insane just pushed everything to the face. And so, even though it's definitely not how I would have played it, I definitely can appreciate all of Insane's reasoning, which I never criticize a player too heavily for.
Yeah, that actually worked as a kind of weird tempo. It was a value play, but
yeah,
Noble Sacrifice is kind of a tempo play as well. It's a one-mana mess you around, get in your head, and make you make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, you have to play slower tempo. Oh my goodness, Muzzy. Sorry, just cut myself off there.
It was a cut-yourself-off worthy hand, I think it's fair to say here, with Zephyrus diving Griffin and the one-drop as well. It's kind of that weird spot you end up in this matchup where you have Zephyrus, you want to play it on 2 for a Bloodfen Raptor just to get a 3-2 on the board, but you don't want the traditional 3 drops because you already have Primordial Explorer or Diving Griffin in hand.
And actually, I looked at Muzzy's hand and went, oh my goodness, and then I saw Insane's hand, and it's a good job for Muzzy he had this hand, because anything else would have lost on the spot by the look of it. Insane's hand pretty good in its own right.
It's pretty good, but it doesn't work well at the moment. Both of his 1-drops are just cleanly cleared off with a bump and a hero power, or just a hero power, in the case of Battle Mage. So instead of going for one or both of them, he goes for neither of his 1-drops here. This is not how you traditionally play the mirror.
I was going to say, like, how many people out there would have done that? Like, nobody. It's so difficult to know what to do, but it does make some sort of sense. But he's going to be behind the whole game because of it.
He is indeed. He does now offer himself a decent Dwarven Sharpshooter coin hero power, should he so desire. But with the pick of a Fairy Dragon, it looks pretty sweet because it essentially forces a trade with the Zephyrus.
And it's actually a very similar thing that's going to happen that happened in the Rogue game, except he's behind this time, not in front. In that he's going to save some things for a huge tempo turn later. The 1-drops aren't going to get played until goodness knows when at the moment, if this carries on. He may get a Sharpshooter down next turn, depending how this turn goes, but he may end up having to clear and then dump them on like turn 6 or something weird, if he's alive on turn 6.
In the end, I really like the decision for Muzzy to go Animal Companion instead of Diving Griffin here, because having a 3-2 on the board after you traded the Diving Griffin isn't that impactful, whereas he could have protected it with a Misha or gotten the Leok to trade up with the Dwarven Sharpshooter. One thing I do find interesting is his decision to go face here with everything, which I think in no small part is due to the Orc Merchant in hand, which can just snipe off the Fairy Dragon if he wants to take the value trade next turn.
And the entire hand, like, he's got so much going on, but because of the strange way that Insane played this, Muzzy probably wasn't quite expecting his comeback. Not that I think it's going to help him, Insane, that much, but Muzzy's probably caught out a little bit here.
I think everything going to plan for Muzzy here. The expected outcome of a Fairy Dragon at 1 health. He can go with the Guardian Orc Merchant. Follow up. It's a very Muzzy style of play, I think. Whenever you're watching him on stream, even though he will be memeing and dreaming with the chat along the way, you can always just see how well thought out his game plan is all the time.
Yeah, and although he is a player that we associate with just being good at Hearthstone, his roots are in hitting people in the face.
True.
It was like the original Muzzy when we first got to know who he was.
And it's just made awkward turn again here for Insane. The best play I'm seeing is like Unleash plus Battle Mage, because Frizz Kindle Roost here is awful.
Yeah, he's... I don't know what word to use here. He's in this position because of his turn 1 decision. But I don't want to use the word it's his fault, because that doesn't quite sound right, because it didn't seem a bad decision based on a random opposing hand.
I mean, he just got by Muzzy, to be perfectly honest. I think Muzzy has played this game perfectly at every point along the way. Zephyrus on 2, even though the option wasn't that good, just to get the card on board. The face attack, in order to get extra damage, because he knew he'd be able to deal with the Fairy Dragon on the following turn. He's had it mapped out. Like you say, these are the matchups that are the bread and butter for Muzzy. He's been playing these kind of tempo-oriented game plans since 2014 and doing it with the utmost level of skill.
Yeah, and it's looking pretty good. It's not over yet, though. Oh, it is over. Look at his hand. Okay, maybe it's not over yet.
Almost.
So, Orc Merchant and Frizz. I think he needs to keep the Orc Merchant to go with the Varanus, though, which leaves him no real play other than the Griffin, which is just grim.
Well, he can go Griffin and then potentially coin Zigsaw. But I guess the game plan of going for Coin Zixor when you have Coin Dino Tamer available on the next turn if you don't go for that does sound pretty silly.
So because he's so far behind, maybe Fizz is actually a good idea. Try and sort of luck box your way into an early Alex or something.
It's pretty annoying for Muzzy, I will say that. These 1 damage effects are very hard to deal with once the Orc Merchant has come down. Although I suppose Orc Merchant on a Divine Shielded minion doesn't sound very clever.
I've seen it done. I've had it done to me, and my opponent, thankfully for him, auto-conceded. Of course, that's what you should do when you do that exact play. Muzzy's got a really hard turn here because everybody's instinct is to be mana efficient, and none of the mana efficient plays, well, there's only one and it's rubbish, but none of the players look particularly good.
Is it rubbish? Varanus is the one minion that survives a trade from Frizz on this turn. I know that the Battle Cry does nothing, but again, it's the argument I make with Rotnest Drake. It's just a well-statted minion. Even if it didn't have the Battle Cry, you wouldn't be that sad to play it out. I think this is very close, if I'm honest.
I think you're scared of getting Varanus back. Your opponent's had a clunky start. He's saved the coin as well. I think you're scared of losing the who plays their Varanus first war.
I guess so, but even then, if you look at the way it breaks down, if Varanus comes down here after the value trade onto the Orc Merchant, there'd be a Poisonous left over, unless the Divine Shield wants to trade into your Poisonous minion, and then your Varanus can trade into their Varanus, or just go face. Based on how it specifically works out, I guess it gets a little bit more complicated with the Felmore. But I really don't think Varanus was that bad on that turn.
Yeah, I'm sure he was considering it, and it's Muzzy,
Yes,
and he
yeah.
wrote, so it was obviously pretty close. That's definitely a fair point. As it happens, Insane's managed to pick up a hand that isn't too bad suddenly. Because he's been stuck with a coin for so long,
Yeah.
it's actually worked out quite well for him, and at least briefly he's going to get the board back here, and with some follow-up with Bran, maybe he gets this done.
That is an insane combo as well that I've actually never seen before in Highlander Hunter. I assumed he was running the standard rush package of Diving Griffin, Zixor, and Faceless Corruptor, but instead he's running Evasive Worm in his deck, which means after Frizz has been played, you can kind of tutor out the 3-mana rush here, which was ludicrously powerful for him. Or 4 mana, sorry.
It just makes me laugh every time that thing goes face. I just can't help but laugh at it. All the myths have been dispelled about that. Like, it isn't 50% chance to go face and 50% chance to hit the minions, but it was quite a convincing story for a while. But it has made a big difference here. Now Muzzy's in a superb position. Even more superb.
Have I just completely been sleeping on Evasive Worm in the deck? Did overnight players realize that this was insane? I've never seen this before, but it looks
I've
sick.
seen it a few times, but I've never seen it with the Frizz combo, so I've slept on that as well.
This is so clever. I mean, I'm still not necessarily certain that it's right, because the combo of going for Desert Spear into Faceless Corruptor is absolutely game-winning the vast majority of times that you play it. But here, for both of these players, one after the other, it was a huge tempo swing.
Yeah. I think
Very cool.
It's just a need to have some extra bits of stuff in your deck as well.
Mm.
Just extra dragons going on and so on. I think it's okay.
I think so too. As Muzzy lets rip with the Dragon Bane, let's see where it goes, hitting the worst possible target, I think it's fair to say. As long as he doesn't die on this turn, which I think is impossible, we're looking at finally a win on the board for the Muzz.
Yeah, and he's going for base, it sets up Stormhammer hero power. And 2 games to 1. Muzz getting back into it.
The moment is upon us.
I'm so excited about this top 8, Derek.
I am so hyped for this top 8, Neil. It's going to be so much fun. Like, getting to see Bunny Hopper very likely play in a top 8 again after it's been a good long while since we've seen him towards the end of a tournament. Alu Temu, one of my favorite players in Asia Pacific, both from his play and also his personality. Hopefully we can get ready for some salty reactions from him.
Eddie was one of the early front runners to be like the Masters Tour player. And is in there doing it again. There's Letta, who's actually been doing really well in Masters Tour as well, as we just get through this lethal. I've enjoyed enough as well, thank you.
Yeah, I think
it's shaping up so well.
It really is. Letta, another player I'm glad you bring up, who'd be a great representative of the Italian scene. We saw Pinas so nearly getting the job done in the last Masters Tour. And I think that is another... I don't necessarily want to say individually any player who's done a staggeringly good job, but I think just cohesively as a practice group, they've really come a long way as a community. And I think the Italian scene could be destined for great things in the future.
I do too, and I do hope they get a Grandmaster. Their support in chat for Pinas last time around was second to none.
Yeah.
The French community used to do that, and they still do a bit, but it's like the French community, like, oh yeah, we've won a Masters Tour. What's new?
I mean, they've won like 10 at this point. Yeah, it doesn't really
exactly,
mean anything anymore.
Just get out of bed, check the results, oh, we won another one, huh?
We need to wait until one day a Greek player will submit a non-trash lineup, and then they'll get to the top 8, and we'll be reminded who the true #1 cheerers are.
Or maybe Silvername will give a Masters Tour a go, see how he gets on after winning the World Championships, and then we'll see that as well.
I think it's more likely that we have a 3-time repeat victor, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe so. But what is looking likely in this game, Neil, is Muzzy to win right out of the gate, given that Insane's hand costs 30 mana going into turn 2. I think Muzzy is going to kill him very, very swiftly. Oh my god.
This thing probably never dies.
Yep, this is never dying.
Like, your turn 2 4/4 Divine Shield nonsense that can attack probably just wins this game of Hearthstone.
Even Zephyrus doesn't have a card that could kill it. Like, what could possibly be done to kill this
you
off?
can silence it, I guess, but even
Great.
so, do you really want to silence a minion that doesn't die? No.
No. Yeah, this is just
Twin
looking
Slice doesn't cost
disastrous.
0, really. Because then we can have the full nonsense.
It's also a shame that Skull doesn't cost 5, and every other card that's been nerfed along the way.
Yeah. I love Demon Hunter. I think it's great.
Same. I love Demon Hunter.
But Felmore coming to the rescue.
Mm.
And by coming to the rescue, I mean coming to visit.
Oh. Another insane top deck.
Joking aside here, is there any way you Twin Slice and Umberwing here? I think you have to do some counting to see if that's correct. It's probably not, but you might be able to win quicker by using all of your mana.
I think the play is just hero power swing and then equip Umberwing, because you have the Twin Slices. You want to preserve the charges just in case you need to take out minions on the opponent's side. But I like your thinking. It's definitely worth looking at the possibilities for a surprise lethal.
So your play is what I would do in a vacuum for sure. If I could be bothered, which I can't, you count to see if your clock changes with a Twin Slice.
Yeah.
Not because of the damage, but because of the mana. But yeah, he's come to the sensible conclusion of who knows what's going to happen in 2 turns' time. I'm probably winning anyway. Let's just play sensible Hearthstone.
Oh, yes. I mean, the other obvious play that we weren't talking about was Satyr Overseer, which you have to consider on that turn. It definitely wasn't terrible, just because it puts the most amount of stats on the board. But I think the potential upside, that you're seeing by holding onto it for another turn is definitely worth.
I don't think even Raven could win from here.
No one in the world can win from here. Muzzy has spent all of his mana every single turn. Insane has done nothing so far to remove the board at all. It's over. He just got completely blown out of the water.
Demons.
You say that like he's got no chance.
He has no chance.
It's 4-2.
If he just goes Twin Slice, hero power, that's what, 6 damage, 10, 14. Glavebound is just lethal on the following turn.
Yeah, this is where he does start slotting in the extra damage, because why not?
Yeah.
I don't know what's right and what's wrong anymore, but I do know this game's over. I'm looking forward to game number 5, though. It's going to be a massive deal. One of these players very close to getting top 8 with a win, and the other one basically out of it.
I mean, I think I can say, Neil, if anything Muzzy did this game was wrong, then I don't want to be right, because this was the supreme aggro game that we've seen. And there it is.
2-2. So, Insane going to have to get it done with the Hunter, which has done all right in this tournament. You don't usually see the most brought deck being a high win rate deck, because it's usually the one everyone's targeting.
Yeah.
But the weirdness with the interactions with Priest and Hunter and nobody bringing Priest has led to that happening somehow. We are going to have Hunter versus Rogue, which is going to be kind of close, I feel.
Very close indeed. I mean, we've seen from the Hunter that it can go fairly aggressive with a nice curve out of the dragons. The damage going to face a Stormhammer can be very, very difficult for Rogue to deal with. But if we see a game anything similar to that from Insane there, even if he does get a decent curve but doesn't get a super dead hand, Rogue is so good at locking down the board early on, and especially, I would argue, for Muzzy's build of the Rogue with the stealth package, even more consistently able to throw down those early threats, lock down the board, and then, of course, follow up with the powerhouse plays of questing, Edwin, Togwaggle, Galakron, whatever you need to hit your win condition.
Against that, if something does get stuck on the board from Insane, there's no Blackjack Stunner. I don't think there's a stab. I'll just check that.
No, there's not.
So if things do get stuck on the board, they're there and they're going to kill the Rogue. That's the other side of it. So Muzzy better keep the board from the start.
And it looks like he's going to do that. It's a respectable curve. Just Spy Mistress, Dagger, Greyheart, fill your hand, fill the board as well. But on the other side, with the pickup of the 1-drop there, Insane has got, appropriately, an insane curve.
Yeah, with a spear as well. Could just be convenient right now.
Spear's nuts.
And because Muzzy isn't able, because it's turn 2, put that much pressure on, Insane does have the time to keep the coin, because that could be massive later on. Already, that in the Grand Slam could be a card that he can work towards on turn 9.
That's very true. It also works very nicely with Desert Spear if you can find Varanus. Getting that down a turn early can be a huge way to swing the board back in your favor.
He's going to need to, because currently he is a long way behind. That is the downside of playing the Felmore for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's in an okay position. Desert Spear is always so much more impressive than it seems. I think this is where I have to give the obligatory Jambray shout out, because I think him, when doing the card reviews for Saviors of Uldum, he was one of the few players that I think was correctly predicting how insane Desert Spear is as a card. It's board control for 4 turns, or for 3 turns, in a single card.
One of my very few success stories in card predictions. I got
really?
Lucky. Yeah. But talking of success stories, this Questing Adventurer might be a huge success story, along with his Shadow Step to draw 1 million cards.
Yeah, how do we like this? I mean, you really want to play Praise Galakron on one of your minions, right? So that it has a chance to just instantly kill off the Felmore on the following turn. And getting the Miscreant down makes sense as well. You're setting up for a big questing next turn, depending on where this Felmore goes. Bit of a yikes. That's not what you wanted.
Not ideal at all. Tough turn for Insane. It's one of those turns where you've got a lot of parting of the ways as the Hunter. You've got to get it right.
Yeah. Am I crazy for suggesting Corrosive Breath Coin Companion?
I don't think any play that you make here is crazy. It's just difficult to know which one is definitely spot on. I think the Corrosive Breath is important. But we can see the danger on the other side, which I think might make a difference. But nothing else quite adds up, so...
Yeah, I guess for his, the benefits that you get from playing it can be absolutely huge.
But this might not end well for him at all. The fact Mercer's done nothing means he's thinking about the questing already.
I mean, he's thinking about just how to sequence this. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you're looking at questing and then probably Ethereal, but maybe actually Titanic, and then Kobold Step Kobold. Allows you for a clean clear on the Frizz, trade in the 3-1 as well. It's really just about whether you want to go for the potential high roll with Ethereal Lackey to hit a Shadow Step in order to get more activations, or if you just go with the safe route of getting down Titanic Lackey.
This just looks absolutely superb.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And he's saying, you can't get to my questing. Unlucky.
I mean, the way he gets through is Varanus, right? Varanus would be absolutely insane on this turn. in order to kill off both of the big minions. But even having said that, I still agree from Muzzy that it was the correct minion to taunt there rather than the questing.
Yeah, because if he hasn't got Varanus, which is the situation we are in, what do you even do? Because next turn, you lose to this questing adventurer. I mean, you don't actually physically die to it, but it becomes 11-11 and kills you or something.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, he really needs to find Varanus soon, or he needs to go Unleash Coin Animal Companion, and if he hits Leok,
yeah,
then that's a clear.
He sees it, he gets it.
2-2, yeah, that's a clear with the swing of the spear as well. You're able to just take out the questing adventure there, and this is the kind of turn that Insane needed to pull things back. All of a sudden, with the frizz effect active, cheap dragons are going to start populating the hand. That was such a big deal.
Yeah, well spotted there. And also, if he did get Huffer, it was probably going to lose the game, but at least he got through the taunt.
Yeah.
Ready to try and top deck Varanus the turn after. It wasn't good. This was the only really good outcome, but it made sense to go for it. It wasn't total lunacy. And now, can he survive on 16? He has nothing in hand that does anything for a few turns. That's the other issue. Muzzy can still carry on pressing here. But Muzzy's got his own issue deciding whether he can just afford to ignore this Leos or not, and he can.
I think it makes sense. You know, the damage has been done, really, in terms of the Leok. So you just need to play out your biggest cards on curve here. However, Galakron, even despite the nerf, to the point where its drawn cards cost 1 now instead of 0, it's still a premium card for Muzzy to find at this point, just to keep the cycle going, start finding those power cards, such as Kronks and Togwaggle.
I feel like this is a really good draw for Insane. Like, just being able to put the Bone Wraith down and hide the Fellwing behind it, the Feywing behind it.
I mean, he's going for a similar line of thought here, I think, but just taking the clean trade with the Desert Spear, and still protecting the Leok, which is not to be sniffed at all.
$11 health, but there's so much good stuff in Insane's deck. This definitely isn't over yet, although it's obviously still grim. How tempted are you to just take Sinister Strike? I don't think it's enough. Deadly Poison's probably better.
I mean, either one, right? He's much closer to lethal than I had clocked onto just a second ago. If he goes for Spy Mistress here to stealth it, then that's down to 8 from his opponent. Deadly Poison plus Eviscerate. He's just won the game at that point, right?
From what he can see, yeah, although he'll be a bit scared that there's some big stuff coming. We can see that there isn't, because the Grand Slam's too far away, and the Feywing's kind of a little bit too in between for turn 7.
Right, and sorry, I should say, with the Bone Wraith in play, that does disrupt his plan quite drastically. But even so, with that thrown out of the way, it's not a guaranteed lethal setup at all, obviously, but it is his primary game plan at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, what you said made sense, even in the context of the Bone Wraith. Like, he can get through it with the Deadly Poison over a couple of turns. He's not in a hurry to get this damage done. He's in a... It needs to be done quickly, but he hasn't got to panic about it.
I mean, there's just not that many taunts left, unless a... I don't know, Dino Tamer Bran comes down here. Maybe a Siamat, I suppose, if you want to be generous. Unless one of those cards comes down, Insane can't apply the counter pressure he needs to swing the game back in time.
No, and he needs to look after everything on the board right now, so this is just not fun for him for trading. Yeah, you just don't want to have to do that, but you have to do that. Oh, you've got to do this as well, I think it's right. You've got to lower the you've got to force the Spy Mistress to do it, or force Muzzy to use up his other charge on his weapon.
I mean, there were draws for lethal right there with just the second Eviscerate if it had come down in order to close out the game. But instead, we're potentially looking at just a Galakron, even though it's only for 1 card.
Yeah, and Muzzy's health total, if this doesn't produce a good card, is not particularly where he would like it to be, I wouldn't have thought.
1 mana backstab?
You've been waiting to say that all week, let's face it.
Just funny. Just one of those things, you don't know why, but it just is funny.
It really is. But yeah,
I
I'm
wonder
talking about Muzzy's health total as if it's like not much. Because he's going to take so much damage now.
Yeah. This, however, is a clever play. Shadow stepping the Spy Mistress purely to reapply the stealth and try and hit lethal next turn.
Whoa! Well, you better hit it. And is Muzzy's good play going to let him win with like a Rush Lackey or something here?
He's so
If it doesn't,
close
he's
to hitting
lost.
the lethal. Oh!
Wow!
Whew. In the
Reverse sweep.
yeah, reapplying the stealth wasn't the winning play, but it maximized his chances, and getting the double eviscerate in the end was enough to get the job done. He moves up to 7-1, a truly impressive record. We'll have to take a look at how his fellow teammate on Radiance, Just Saiyan, is doing, because I think he was at 6-1 as well. I'm not sure if he's also gone up to the 7-1 record. But it is so good to see Muzzy back on form here and doing well in the Masters Tour.
Saiyan also 7-1.
Wow.
And we are going to finish round 8 in just a moment. So let's just have a quick look at the standings. I think that's important going into the last round of the Swiss. Old Boy, Insane's 120 card teammate, and Bunny Hopper. There we go. Both 8-0. And then look at the lineup behind. I know I've seen a lot of the Chinese league. Lee and X-Hope are both playing very well this season. Muzzy and Saiyan are teammates. Eddie, Ties, a million-time winner Blizer, Alutimu, all basically Grandmasters. And then Letta, who has done well in Masters Tour after Masters Tour without quite getting there. And that's a massive deal if he can get there, because none of the people trying for promotion are going to earn any money, because the Grandmasters are going to take it all. So anyone who gets into that top 8 who isn't a Grandmaster and isn't one of the Chinese players is making a massive inroad towards getting towards Grandmasters themselves.
They really are. I mean, this is an unbelievably hype top 8. Even if you're not super invested in the competitive Hearthstone scene, if you know anything about Hearthstone, Tice being in the top 8 already tells you how stacked of a bracket is. And we have 2 previous Masters Tour winners in Eddie and X-Blize. We have some of the most impressive and storied players from all the different regions here. I think this could not be more exciting. We're obviously not getting it into that until top 8 tomorrow, but we do still have one final round, I believe, of action today.
Yeah, and I guess that the viewers don't want to hear me waffle anymore. They want to know who's going to get into that top 8. So we're going to take 3 minutes. You do not go anywhere. You stay here and you watch who gets there, and we'll see you in just